Hello, friends. Welcome to the Nexus Podcast. I'm your host, James Dice. Each week, I fire questions at the leaders of the smart buildings industry to try to figure out where we're headed and how we can get there faster without all the marketing fluff. I'm pushing my learning to the limit, and I'm so glad to have you here following along. Before we get started, here's a quick note from our sponsor. As we unpacked on one of our most popular episodes ever, episode 44 with the legendary John Petsy, SkySpark is a comprehensive software platform for connecting, storing, analyzing, and visualizing data from devices and equipment systems. SkySpark's automated analytics, KPIs, energy, and greenhouse gas apps turn your data into actionable intelligence, providing improved performance, reduced downtime, and operational savings. Head over to skyfoundry.com for insightful white papers, case studies, and blog posts, as well as a link to sign up for a free demo. This episode is a conversation and history lesson with Leroy Walden, a veteran of the building automation system integrator ecosystem in Atlanta, Georgia. We unpacked how the building automation supply chain functions, including the roles of the manufacturers, distributors, and integrators that are responsible for controlling HVAC systems in all major metropolitan areas. And of course, we talked about the downsides and opportunities of that status quo when it comes to implementing smart building technologies. And as we talked about in the past, HVAC controls are just one silo in the building, and that silo operates similarly to the other silos. So the insights in this conversation are applicable to access control, lighting, electrical products, etc. One word of warning, if you think this conversation doesn't concern you, yet you want to use data from the building and smart building applications or control systems better to save energy, please think again. This does concern you. So without further ado, please enjoy this conversation with Leroy Walden. Hello, Leroy. Welcome to the Nexus Podcast. So glad to have you on. Can you introduce yourself?
Thanks, James. Great to be here. Leroy Walden. Got to know James through a meeting at Realcomm this past June. And my background is, I've been in the building automation temperature control industry. Started in 1978, back in the day with pneumatics. And I've come through every iteration of electronic, computer automated, all the way up to the most recent, obviously web-based, IP-based, every different iteration, every different generation. So I've been passionate about the industry since the beginning. I worked for a manufacturer, worked for Robert Shaw Controls, which got folded up and wound up as a part of the Schneider Electric family now. After that, I joined an independent dealer. And he and I more or less started a temperature control building automation business in the Atlanta marketplace. And I had the opportunity to go to work for one of the largest engineering and mechanical contracting firms in Atlanta. And with that, I got a lot of exposure to the majority of the commercial office properties and a lot of the industrial office properties in and around the Atlanta area and the Charlotte area. And during that time, I became very familiar with commercial buildings, commercial office buildings, data centers. We did a lot of entertainment venues, colleges, universities, and so forth. So I've seen a lot, covered a lot, hotel, motels, you name it. So, but through the years, the technology has been growing. Sometimes we're growing at a rapid clip. Sometimes we're seeing revolutionary change, but for the most part, it's been evolutionary. As time has gone, nothing much has changed about thermodynamics. So consequently, the systems to control heating and cooling haven't really changed that dramatically over the years. Concepts are the same. And pretty much the building mechanical systems design has remained fairly consistent, through those years. So, so it's been a good career. Since 1978. Retired in 2017, full-time, and then been doing consulting work, since that time, working with the Realcomm folks, helping them in a couple of the shows that they're doing, a couple of webcasts that they've done. So It's been pretty good.
I was going to say, there's no way you can say you're fully retired because you're here talking to us.
Yeah.
Semi-retired. All right.
Yeah. Well, like I say, it's kind of like, once the passion's in you, you can't turn your back on it. And as I told you one time in the past, I'm a little bit selfish about it because I got a son that's in the industry now. And so I want to make sure that he stays on and gets the opportunity that I had to build a nice career.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on to share the passion. So let's set I want to hear you sort of talk about the first time you and I met. So we were at Realcomm in June of 2022. I was up in the stage in the, what do they call it? The integrator summit.
Yep.
So
Yep.
the big 4 hour session beforehand. I was up on the stage, um, and we were talking about the independent data layer and the horizontal architecture and all the things that we sort of unpack on this show all the time. Right. It was me kind of sort of sharing a condensed version of that and
Yeah.
then moderating a panel on the independent data layer. And you came up to me afterwards and you said there's a certain subset of the audience that's maybe rolling their eyes or walking out of the room.
Yeah.
Can you sort of talk about that in a little more detail? What was your
Yeah.
experience during that session?
It kind of caught me off guard, James, quite honestly, because the message that you and the panel that you had assembled, the message that you were bringing was very topical, um, interesting, captivating, and necessary. The conversation I felt was this is where we're going. I mean, this is what we've been working to do. This independent data layer. I mean, it's like, yeah, let's get the data freed up. Let's get it so that we can use it, benefit from it, and we can. I liken it to a campfire. That you have a campfire, it warms everyone. The data creates that campfire that warms everyone. Everyone can use it and benefit from it. So I was really excited, as I could tell most of the audience was really involved. And so I was really quite shocked when I had a few people that kind of buttonholed me out in the hallway and said, we're just not going to sit up here and hear just nothing about, these venture capital funded, new technology guys all the time. It was like, I was, I was shocked. I
You're
just,
blown away, huh?
I was shocked because, I was like, guys, this is the message that we've been trying to get out for all these years, and here it is. Here we've got a person that's kind of putting the right people together and having this right conversation. And, you're wanting to make a fuss about it, and turn your back on it. And I just didn't understand it. So that's the reason why I reached out to you. I wanted to try to say, let me help understand a little bit more why. And I've done some research and I shared that with you as to why some of the people are feeling the way they are. And so then it's like, well, I want to kind of make it a mission at this point to try to help, let's say, help people more understand that this is not a threatening message. This is a message that we need to unify around. And this is the technology that we really need, because this is our industry. This is the way forward. And having these conversations and inviting everyone that's involved in this industry, inviting everyone in to participate in the conversation is a key.
Yeah, and I really appreciated you coming up to me afterwards, and I think we grabbed a little bite afterwards as well because I wasn't aware of that. I feel like I feel it, I sense it intuitively,
Yeah.
but nobody's coming up to me and telling me, you're full of shit. No one's coming up to me and telling me, you shouldn't be saying this. No one's coming up to me and telling me venture capital is not going to work or anything like that. I'm not hearing any of that, and so I love that sort of feedback. So we're gonna sort of unpack some of the stuff that you uncovered in your research here today in this conversation, because I feel like there's a little bit of a um, combining of the old and the new that needs to happen
Yeah.
here. And
Oh,
I
I
think
agree.
that's
I agree wholly, wholly 100%,
so. Let's start with the old. So you started with computer science around the 70s, the 80s, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk about kind of, and I don't want to spend all day on this. We've done this in previous podcasts. The one that comes to mind is John Petsy. We talked about the different phases of the industry, but can you just talk about a little bit how you've experienced it in your career, specifically with, you mentioned how you view Nexus as sort of getting the message out. And I think what you mean is building automation systems in the past have been sort of like, if you ask a asset manager, a property manager, or the dean of students at the university or the head of a data center, they're not necessarily thinking about the BAS, right? And so one of the things I've been trying to do is get that message out. Here's the importance of BAS. Here's the importance of BAS for decarbonization. Here's the importance of BAS for occupant experience. Here's the importance of BAS for this, that, and the other thing, right? And so can you just talk about kind of the phases you've seen in the industry and mostly about how you've experienced it from a BAS is behind the scenes, not really getting much viewing.
Um, I started off with pneumatics, as I say, and having been, in computer science, going to school, I was on the cusp when I entered the industry. We were on the cusp of automated systems. A lot of the people that I went to school with actually went to work with the company that became Automated Logic, which was an Atlanta-based company. And so consequently, they were really on the leading edge of a lot of the innovative technology as it related to PC-based user interface and, communicating systems, so forth. Company I worked for, Robert Shaw, we had a similar type system that kind of evolved. First off, we had many computer-based systems, which I just call those one-offs, totally like oil and gas holdovers. That was the only technology we had. But it really wasn't until the PCs came out, 82, 83, 84, in that era, that the desktop PC really kind of emerged as the tool or the platform to be used. So, believe it or not, a lot of the technology that was developed did come from the oil and gas industry, as it relates to the special purpose, single purpose microprocessor based controllers, like for pumps or valves or for air handlers or that type of thing. And the idea of those was to connect all those up in a network, and the network would then quote unquote stand alone, and the PC would only be used to interrogate and gather the data from that. So,
Mhm.
that was kind of like the first, what I would really call true building automation, or true automation that was available to integrators. Because up to that point, the systems that I talked about them were primarily only available through factory offices. So you had the Johnson Control office, the Honeywell office, the Automated Logic office, the Robert Shaw office. Those were the only people that technology was available to. But once it got into the PC realm, then systems independent dealers, independent integrators, independent VMS contractors kind of came on the scene.
Hmm.
And each one of those would have, in a given marketplace, you may have two or three that are really competent. In the Atlanta marketplace, we had really three good independent building automation capable, PC-based systems capable people that would really do a good job, outside of the factory offices, the big five, or whatever you want to call them, the Marvin Coleman's, the Robert Shaw, Siemens, all those folks.
Okay.
So that's kind of, that was kind of the gestation. But the truth be told now is that there's been very little change in the way mechanical systems are put together, even from the late 80s up until even the most current generation. And I'm talking in the context primarily spec office buildings, commercial office buildings, 20,000 square foot full plate, 10 floors, 20 floors, 15, 30 floors, whatever. Because that was the Atlanta marketplace, and has been the Atlanta marketplace for quite a while, which is what I've done.
Mhm. Yeah, and really what you're saying is this ecosystem where you had the manufacturers, distributors of those products usually maybe are separate, but not always, and then you had the system integrators. This is really the ecosystem in which technology has been installed in buildings for decades, right?
Yeah, you literally since there were independent dealers, and that really didn't start until the late 80s, early 90s. And independent dealers being able to get access to true communicating building automation, automated systems, that was very rare. Probably the first people that started it were the Robert Shaw and Marvin Coleman channels. Actually had independent dealers. There was a couple of others, Control Systems International, CSI, Andover was another, where you could, buy the product, off the shelf, if you want to say that. Usually it went through a distributor, through a wholesaler in some cases, or a direct distribution channel, directly from like a second tier distribution channel.
Yeah.
Johnson Controls then got into the game. They had kind of a secondary capable system that they sold under the Metasys brand for quite a while to independent dealers. But for the most part, it was, usually the independent dealer at that time would be 3 to 4, maybe engineering type guys that would also project manage and sell work. And then, they would have technicians to do the install, hire electricians to pull wire if they needed to, and then, sometimes the project manager would program the project, and sometimes the field techs would program the project. It really depended upon the the volume of business at the independent dealer. And
Yeah.
those independent dealers are going to be anywhere from, I'll say, $3 million to $8 million in gross revenue per year. So
Okay.
I mean, they're good, solid businesses, but they're not they're not the mega integrators that we're
Yeah.
seeing nowadays. There's a lot of those guys got rolled up in some of those consolidations, through the
Yeah.
years. But
So
they,
I was just going to ask you with the roll up, can you talk about just maybe use Atlanta as a lens? Atlanta is going to be just like a bunch of other cities in the United States,
yeah,
right? What's the ecosystem look like today? I think we've seen Niagara has shaken up this marketplace a little bit, and
yeah,
from when you started, and then you're saying I agree the roll ups have seemed like they've shaken up this industry a little bit as well.
yeah,
So
yeah. They
what's
have.
the Atlanta market like?
And as an independent, there's as a young person, a young independent dealer, the sky's the limit. So, but you roll that forward 20 years. Now this guy's thinking about what do I do? How do I retire? What's my end game? You know what I mean? Because when you get right down to it, what he's got is a customer list, and he's got
Hmm.
access to a product. He's got an
Hmm.
installed base that he can do service, but his business as an entity is not that valuable to I'm going to sell my business and get rich. Basically what he hopes is he can sell his business and retire comfortably.
Hmm.
So what happened is that, as the availability of product became more and more prominent through Niagara, Niagara built a whole ecosystem around independent dealers. They had master distributors in areas, and then those master distributors would sell 3 to 4 tiers of distribution. They would have the light commercial guys that would do, rooftop warehouse office buildings, and they would have another group of people that would do some of the K through 12 schools, maybe some light, small university, community college type buildings, things like that. And then they would have the next tier up, which would be the commercial office buildings and the entertainment venue, hotel, motel, those kind of guys.
Hmm.
And then we'd also have the master integrators that they would set up in a certain area. And so it was the ecosystem was, a lot of people at the bottom end and a very small number of people, maybe one or two at the very top end, the way those distribution channels were put together over the years. So when it come time for those guys, those young guys, maybe they were at the first tier or the second tier, whatever, they decided to sell. Well, these big roll up companies,
Hmm.
I can't recall the name of them right now, would come in and make an offer. And basically what they do is they'd buy the rolling stock, their trucks, they would buy the tools, they would, lease their property, and, they would pay the guy some kind of a severance package. And then, he would stay on board for 2 or 3 years to make sure the business transitioned profitably to the new owner. And then he would take his payout and go out the door, so that has happened at least once, maybe twice, in the Atlanta marketplace. Especially, I know that having been involved in a business association of independent dealers across the U.S., in the past, Inside IQ is the name of that group, and they're still a viable group. But a lot of the members there also took those buyouts and rolled their
Hmm.
businesses up into large entities, across the U.S.
Yeah.
So
So each city is going to have what types of entities now? They're going to have this one of the offices of one of these big roll ups, and then offices from the manufacturers that have field offices. Is that kind of what the ecosystem looks like?
yeah, there's still a smattering. For the most part, the factory offices are non-existent, or if they do exist, they just exist to support the very large accounts,
Mm.
like the Atlanta airport, or Emory University Hospital or something like that. Where the factory office, the Siemens office, or the Honeywell office in some cases, or the Johnson Controls office, which is, just a shadow of what it used to be as it relates to the Atlanta market. I'm sure a lot of other markets same way. But the most part, though, it's made up of independent dealers. It's independent dealers that are either still totally independent, or independent dealers that are a part of this, if you want to call it a franchise or whatever, these big roll ups that have kind of come into fashion these days. So,
Hmm.
so that and
Got it.
that's pretty much what we see and what's still going on in the Atlanta market.
And then so all of these independent integrators, what are their contracts like with the manufacturers? Like, do they have exclusive access? Do they have certain special pricing? Like, what does that look like? How does that
The
work?
ideally, you would have a sole source relationship. And in the early days, those were kind of the norm. Like, for instance, if you signed up with CB Environmental Controls, which became Schneider Electric, to sell their Martin Coleman product, well, you would be the only licensed dealer for that product in your marketplace. And that was really good because as an independent dealer, you could gain a lot of momentum and get a lot of traction around that product. You know, so we work really hard to make sure that proprietary access to that product wasn't our main calling card. We make sure that proprietary access to that product meant for our customers, we could mobilize the entire organization, the manufacturer, the engineering, and all to solve one of our customers' problems if we needed to. But we didn't say, well, we're the Barnes Coleman guy, so you got to buy from us, or else, we're going to rip your stuff out or make it not work, or, our prices or whatever. So, but the reality of it is that it's necessary for, as an independent dealer, to have the confidence that the product that you're representing is fully developed and fully supported. Because when you go out to talk to a customer to sell a system, you're basically laying your integrity out and conjoining your integrity and capabilities to that manufacturer. And if that manufacturer is giving you junk product, then all of a sudden it's going to shed a bad light on you and your team and so forth. So it's a very difficult process to choose a manufacturer and then hope that you can get the support from that manufacturer, because the last thing you want is, let's say, for instance, and I'll prevent using names, but there are manufacturers that don't have a problem setting up multiple dealers in the same marketplace and in the same market segment. So, for instance, if I'm an independent dealer serving the commercial office building market, they don't have a problem setting up another independent dealer in the same marketplace with the same market focus, because their credo is more feet on the street means more sales.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty self-serving. And what it does is that injures the relationship that I would have as an integrator to want to sell their product as a primary product for me. And the reason for that is I don't want to build a building, in other words, when you're bidding for commercial office building properties, first bid is low. I mean, you're going to be your rock bottom margin to be low, because you got to beat Siemens, you got to beat, you got to beat all these people. So you're going to go in on the low margin base building. The last thing you want to do is to see low margin. You get the low margin build a base building, and all of a sudden your crosstown rival comes flying in with his access to the same product and the same technology that you have. Take your, what should be your high margin business, which is tenant fit, ongoing service and maintenance, all that kind of stuff. So when you're an independent dealer, it's a really fine dance that you dance with each of these manufacturers, because, just getting access to the product is one key, but you've also got to have some support from those manufacturers to have them recognize that it takes effort to create this marketplace and to maintain that marketplace. I've got to pay people. I put people in trucks. I got to insure people. You know what I mean? And I got to incentivize people, and that costs money. And if they disregard how important that is by having another dealer set up across town that maybe he's got a different cost structure than I got. Maybe he doesn't provide his guys with health insurance. Maybe he doesn't provide his guys with 401k. So all of a sudden now I'm put at a competitive disadvantage. So it was always really important to me to have a very clear delineation with all the manufacturers, any manufacturer that I represented, to make sure that they were sensitive to what my needs were. And then I, in turn, would be sensitive to what their needs were. I would make sure that I only brought their product to the best customers, that I would always bring their product to the customers that would appreciate, that we could then work together on and develop that customer relationship long term.
So I think this is such an interesting perspective that you're sharing for, I think, probably for the first time in the community on this podcast. A lot of times we have people talking about how there needs to be multiple vendors in each marketplace to create competition and to like avoid a vendor getting locked in, because so many people have worked with building owners, myself included, where they buy a certain system, they like the integrator that they work with, and 10 years, 15 years goes by and that relationship sours. That vendor starts to jack the prices up and people are feeling like they're getting sort of, I think one of our community members, Terry, calls it lock 'em and loot 'em.
Yeah.
Right. So can you talk about kind of maybe give some perspective on how that feels when people talk about it from that perspective?
Well, the majority, yeah, and I agree 100%. As I said, the thing that I wanted to make sure that the culture that I built within my organization was the fact that we weren't going to let proprietary access to product be our main calling card. We weren't going to say, hey, we're the guy, so you got to deal with me, so get over it.
Yeah.
We wanted to have customer service. And what I always wanted to do was to make sure that the product that I brought to the customer was a product that I knew I could support better than anybody else in the marketplace. And that was one of the things I constantly challenged my team to be better than the competition even with the same product, because there was that time that, and still is current today, that Niagara is the predominant platform when you look at where, how all systems are how they're connected, how they're integrated, and Niagara provides the primary UI. And so it was very important, vitally important for my team to be more competent with the product than their competition, because the competition could get the exact same product. Now, the comfort that I wanted to always give my client was the fact that if you ever get tired of me, there are other people in this marketplace that can support this product. And I'll be glad to introduce them to you if any point in time in the future that comes to it. The thing though, and this is a truism that I don't see when it's going to stop, and that is the field controllers that you provide, whether they be Schneider Electric or whether they be Johnson Controls, whether they be Distech or whomever in the marketplace, those field level controllers are really kind of where the rubber meets the road as it relates to the independent dealer and the relationship that he has with that manufacturer. In a lot of respects, there are a lot of the distributors now are selling through multiple channels, multiple people, as we described. So let's say, for instance, Distech, I know that in the Atlanta marketplace, there's about 3 independent Distech dealers. And so what that means is that there's an opportunity for those dealers to compete head to head with the same customer. And the way they're able to do that is that the configuration tool that you need to configure those field controllers. In other words, basically, when you pull the controller out of the box, it thinks it's a toaster. So basically, you have to have software that you can tell it you're not a toaster. You're controlling a terminal unit. You're controlling an air handler. You're controlling a chiller pump, or whatever. And that software tool is a proprietary software tool. Even though we have BACnet as the primary technology that is allowing the communication, each manufacturer implements through a proprietary piece of software. And I don't think there's anything insidious about the fact that it's proprietary. It's just that every manufacturer does it different, slightly different. The way they set their controller up, the processor that they use in their controller, those types of things. So, but it comes down to the fact that it's a proprietary tool, and it's only licensed to their licensed dealers. So if I do want to have it transition to my competition, I'll be open to say, let me introduce them to you. I'll give you the one I think that would be the best for you. You can choose that one as you want to, but I would have to choose one that also had access to the field controllers that I had installed. Otherwise that next person that came in would have to completely tear out what I put in, which I don't think they have enough money in the vault to do that. Or they would have to be able to implement through open protocol. And, if they needed to replace a controller, if they needed to repair or recommission a controller, whatever, they would have to come up with a way to do that. So that's a fallacy in open systems as they exist today.
Totally. Let's pause here for one more quick word from our sponsor, and then we'll get back to the show. As we covered in our recent blog series on the 5 vital roles, smart buildings require engineers, and engineering that allows OT and IT systems to seamlessly and securely integrate with each other and integrate with common platforms. Creating a successful building intelligence strategy entails translating the owner's goals to outcomes, use cases, intelligent building technologies, and enhanced MEP systems. To learn about what JB&B is calling MEP 3.0 and the value of building intelligence design, check out our friends at JB&B and specifically their podcast conversation with Wired Score at the link in the show notes. And some of the people listening to this right now, so we're half an hour in, are probably sitting here like, there's no way that's how buildings are operated today, right? And what I'd like to reiterate is like, these systems are being installed and they're going to be left in place for how many years? 15? I mean, I've
20
seen
years.
30, 35, 40-year-old building automation systems. So what we're describing right now is the nature of buildings today, even though you're talking about sort of a history. I'd love to ask you one more question about this sort of relationship between these different. So right now we're talking about product manufacturers, distributors, system integrators, and then the customer. It's like a ecosystem. It's a symphony of all these people working together that outputs a building automation system. I want to zero in on system integrators, but just one more question on that ecosystem itself. Where did this strategy of low bid on the first project and then try to make up margin on future stuff, where did that come from? What you mentioned, you need to compete with Siemens or you need to compete with so-and-so, but like everyone that's my age or younger in the industry is kind of like, why is that a thing? Right. So can you sort of explain where that came from? Because it's at the root of a lot of issues, right?
It is, but I mean, just imagine if you were sitting on top of the Saturn V rocket in the Apollo, everything below you that's about to blast you to the moon was built by the low bid contractor. I mean, how confident, how confident would you be?
Right.
And that's the reality. That's the reality of the way buildings are bought, and that didn't just start. That's the way. Go down memory lane a little bit. Used to in Atlanta, there was called a bid room. And all of the manufacturers at that time, Honeywell, Johnson, MCC, or Landis and Gear, Powers, those companies, they had to go to a central bid room because in the bid room, they had a teletype machine, like a Western Union teletype machine that they would use to turn their bids in. Because everything it's all open, it's all public open bid and that kind of thing. And I'm not saying that it ever happened, but I can tell you that there have been times that I've heard about the Honeywell guy walked into the one guy and said, Johnson guy said, "Hey, look, we're really busy right now, so I'm not going to be low on this job. I just want you to know that. So this is your job." I'm not saying that they did that. I don't know any names, but I I have heard that scenario did happen on it. So low bid is what wins, particularly in the commercial marketplace, and really any public opening, any college, university, any large facility, it's always low bid. So particularly on a commercial office building, when it's a core and shell, when you may have 2 or 3 built out floors, you may have a main lobby, you'd have a central plant, but everything else would just be shelled. And it would be built out as, tenants come in, move in, that kind of thing. It's a foregone conclusion that when you got the base system, that tenant work would follow. And that tenant work is where you're going to get your reasonable margin, the margin that sustains your business, not the margin that it took, to get the job, I'm trying to get the 10 or 15%, gross margin that I need just to break even. So I can get that 23 to 28% gross margin that sustains my business, going forward. So, so that's a concept that's been around and is still around. I mean, if you go to any public opening, it's low bid wins.
Yep. All right. That'll be a good history lesson for people. That little summary. So let's zero in on system integrators. So they're obviously They have the manufacturers and distributors that are creating and selling the product to them, and they have the building owners that they're selling the product to and installing for. You sent me a really amazing email that I should probably just publish. And I wanted to sort of unpack that
Okay.
email. And maybe we just go, I think there's 7 statements you made here, and I'm going to walk through each statement and just have you sort of respond. The first statement you said is, it came with a picture. You said, every smart building contains multiple panels like this one pictured here. And it's this massive panel that we can put in the show notes. Each panel is custom designed, custom fabricated to exactly match the building's mechanical and electrical equipment. Each module within each panel was selected for its specific mix of inputs and outputs and programmable functions. Can you talk a little bit about that piece?
Yeah, sure. And again, still talking about the core and shell commercial office building, or, it could be a corporate office building as well. The reality of it is that when the mechanical systems are designed, there's some decisions made about, are they going to have central chiller plant, and they're going to have central air handler that serves each floor, and they're going to have some kind of an air distribution system. And the majority of the time, you've got some terminal units, some either VAV, PIU, some type of air throttling device on the ductwork that provides a heating and air conditioning system. So then from that point, you look at, let's say, for instance, the air handler on the floor. There's a certain mix of inputs and outputs that are required to make that air handler function. Discharge air temperature, static pressure control, variable speed drive, maybe a chill water valve, maybe some basin bypass dampers, maybe an outside air economizer system, and so forth. And it really comes down to the designer, to the mechanical designer, as far as the way that mechanical system's put together. Then the building automation systems engineer has to sit down and match point for point, input for input, output for output. And so consequently, there's a lot that goes into selecting the controller, because every manufacturer will have a controller with a mix of inputs and outputs.
Mm-hmm.
The one that best fits the bill for this particular application. So the majority of the time, the air handlers will all be the same in a 15, 20, 30-story office building. So once you make those decisions once, then every one of those air handlers will choose this controller with this mix of inputs and outputs, and you'll build that control panel, when the control panel basically is nothing but with the modules mounted inside. You got wireways in the panel, it goes out to terminal strip that are then connected up to the input or output devices, or on the variable speed drive, or the chill water valve, or whatever it is. But that's all in an enclosure, enclosed in the system. And so there's a lot of decisions that go into that. It's a mix and match. And as I've said in the past, every building's a custom prototype. So you may look at it and say 2 buildings are identical, but the reality of it is, you look inside the systems, the building engineer or the mechanical engineer that designed it may have had some new technology that he wanted to bring into light in the second building that wasn't in the first building. And so that causes a change in nuance in the building automation system. So each one of those, and so the manufacturer has to make sure that he has on his shelf a controller that has the right mix of inputs and outputs that you need as an integrator. And then also that there's enough capacity, there's enough processing capacity, there's enough memory to store the algorithms, there's enough throughput for communications. They may have developed some custom programs like area control, or something that would coordinate the terminal units that are connected to that air handler. So make sure there's enough memory and all, make sure there's enough speed, so that if you want to draw data out, you want to do some of that fault detection diagnostics, make sure that the controller has the capacity to feed that data out at the throughput, at the rate that you want to get it. So there's a lot of decisions that go into the manufacturing of those individual little controllers. And those individual little controllers, from a manufacturer's perspective, they hope to sell those for around $150 to $200 a piece, which is
the manufacturer was your next statement. So let me read that one out, and then we can go into that. So this is a couple statements I'm combining into one, but you said each module was manufactured. And when you say module, you're also talking about the field controllers you referenced
Exactly. Yeah.
earlier. So each module was manufactured by a specific manufacturer in response to industry demand at what they hope will be a competitive price point. Each manufacturer must conceive, design, prototype, create firmware, alpha test, beta test, and ultimately field test each product before beginning mass production at scale. The price point for these controllers ranges from a couple $100s, like you said, to as much as $1,000 per copy as sold to the integrator, who then marks it up, right, and
Right.
sells it to the customer. All the development costs are sunk costs for the manufacturer.
Right.
Most will not see a new product break into profitability for many months after that release, assuming there are no extensive post-release issues that they created once it's released into the wild.
Yeah. We call those undocumented features.
Okay.
Things they didn't expect. Oh my God, we didn't think of that.
So what you're trying to convey there, though, is that these are long product life cycles. There's a lot that goes into them.
Yeah.
And once they come out, they're kind of fixed entities for a while. And what I don't think you said here is a lot of times these are, like you said, create the firmware, alpha, beta test. These are hardware products, right?
Exactly.
They
Yeah.
weren't really designed with a specific software layer. They were designed to be a hardware device that has one specific function.
Right. Right. Fully programmable. They all have EEPROM in them that, once the integrator designs the system in response to the mechanical design, and once he creates the application, the algorithms for temperature control, pressure control, whatever it is, once they're created, then they're saved in EEPROM on the control. And then, that controller from that point forward, it's fully programmable and you get it, but now it's become a special purpose, special application specific for that air handler, that set of pumps, the fans, or whatever it is. And so that's that's the key. And you're right. I mean, once it's set in motion, once it's set in place, and once it's commissioned and turned over, from that point you go into the maintenance phase, and no one expects that controller to not do its job. Everybody expects that controller to just do that one thing all the time and be available to query, be available to diagnose, be available all the time. But, it's going to be there for 15, 20, 25 years doing this one little job.
Yeah.
And so as I say, these manufacturers, and I'm talking about the big guys, the Johnsons, the Honeywells, the Siemens, anybody that makes these products to sell through independent distribution, they really have to be up on their game to make that product as robust as they can. And that's a hope that I have as an integrator. I want a product that's robust. I don't want something that's just really fragile. If you turn the light switch on too much, you get a spark of an EMF and it pops the processor. You want that. You want things to be able to take a licking and keep on ticking.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's quite a bit of development that has to go into it, where they kind of make those things as technician proof or as foolproof as possible. I've subscribed to a group even today on social media. And one of the guys posted a picture of a controller that a 277 volt leg voltage had brushed down across the terminals on the controller and just popped the whole side off the controller. But the doggone controller, the output that it hit, you hadn't burned that output out. Every other function of the controller kept on going. And it was amazing. I said, "Are you kidding me? That thing is still working?" He said, "Oh, yeah, it's still controlling the air handler and it's just doing fine." I said, "Wow." I said, "But somebody let the smoke out of it."
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
So that's really important as an integrator, because you want to have to go back and revisit every controller. I mean, there've been many times when we've had a whole network of, let's say, terminal units, like 25, 30, 40 on a floor, that someone accidentally applies 24 volts to the communications bus. And that happens more than we want to say. But you put 24 volts on the communications bus. Well, those communications chips don't like 24 volts. They don't like AC. They want signal level. So all of a sudden you've got 25 or 30 terminal unit controllers that are above ceilings, by the way, usually over top of some kind of a high finished desk, or whatever, inaccessible. And all of a sudden you got to go visit each one of them because the chipset inside's burned out.
Mm-hmm.
So having those controllers built so they can be tolerant to that.
Yeah.
And they exist now. They exist now where you have to put line voltage on the chipset, on the COM chipset, and it won't blow the thing up, which is really amazing to me. that they can do that now. But I mean, that's just the generation of electronics that we have. So when I was choosing a manufacturer, I wanted to make sure that they were doing the best that they could do to keep those
Mhm.
products as robust and scale, because I wanted to buy sometimes 200, 300. I
Yeah.
wanted to be able to get those within 3, 4, 5 days, or 3, 4, 5 weeks at the most, not 2 months, a year and a half or whatever. So when they have to make those things, I mean, they're turning those things out by the hundreds every day. And so we got to make sure that what they're giving us is good long-term, good long-term product.
Totally. And that's what the distributor comes into play, is being able to handle those local projects, 300 controllers, being able to handle the cash flow side
Key.
of things for
They're a
the
key
system
element
integrator.
in that supply chain, because
Yeah.
even though you have a good relationship with that manufacturer, you're one distributor or you're one integrator across their network of integrators across a country, across a region. That local guy, the local distributor, he may have 150 or 200 on the shelf that you can go get right now.
Mhm.
That always makes a big impact.
Absolutely. Um, well, before we move on from the manufacturer to your next statement, you got 2 statements left here. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is this concept that we see in our personal lives a lot now with planned obsolescence. So you see this hardware driven product, a hardware focused product, it has software on it, but it's mostly a hardware product. And at some point, that manufacturer stops supporting that device. And now everybody's got to pay for new ones across, like you said, 300 controllers on a
Yeah.
job. Where does that come into play? How does that sort of work?
In the building automation industry, fortunately, the most modern controllers, when I say modern controllers, I'm talking about controllers that were built um, mid 2000s and on. They basically, if they ascribe to the magnet protocol, then usually they've got some, they've got the newest technology. They got high throughput, so you can get data in and out if you need to.
Mhm.
They're robust from a communications chipset, so they're more tolerant to oops and miswires and those kind of things. Um, so once they're put in place, I mean, quite honestly, I've seen many times we would do a building automation system upgrade of an old, let's say a Siemens. I don't know if you remember the Stafa product, but the Stafa product, which was eventually combined with the Siemens product, Stafa was a European company, and they had some of the most unique chipsets and communications protocols that I've ever experienced in the marketplace. And some of those controllers were put in the probably early 2000, 2002, 2004. And those controllers still work. And those are, I mean, they're very robust. And you want to talk about fault tolerant. They're very fault tolerant for miswiring or those kind of things. So you don't want to throw them away. I mean, so many times we would do building the automation system upgrade and not do anything but change the front end, the core technology, where
Mhm.
we would do a Niagara integration, or we do an integration to another similar central core platform, new UI, completely dress up everything, but we're still communicating onto those old network of controllers. They're hanging above the ceiling. So we could talk about planned obsolescence, but the refresh cycle on those kinds of things is not, I mean, it's 15, 20 years. And you could reasonably expect, you put that controller up there, it's going to last 15, 20 years
Mhm.
minimum. Now, there
Yeah.
have been instances, we did one for a large home goods a retailer here in town, and they were just not satisfied with the base product, the core product that was put in their building when it was built. And 15 years later, they paid us to come in and take out every piece of that technology and put in a whole new technology. And that's very unusual and very rare that you actually
Hmm.
run into that, where you do a
Yeah.
complete rip and replace. And it just doesn't happen that often. It's
Yeah.
very disruptive. It's very disruptive, as you can imagine.
Yeah. And the reason I wanted to point that out is because that's why you see in a building today this controller from 1996, because you have the manufacturers designing it that way, and then you have obviously it's very difficult to rip and replace. Okay, your next statement was each integrator must train their staff on the proper application of each new product released by their contracted manufacturer. Training at scale is a very expensive proposition for an independent integrator who hopes to maintain a profit margin sufficient to sustain the business while absorbing these sunk costs and enduring margin erosion on the first couple of projects where the new and unfamiliar product is applied.
I'll give you an example of that. Honeywell developed their line-based controllers, early in the open system phase. And if you've ever worked with Echelon or the Echelon protocol or line protocol, it's very robust, but it's also very, it'll punish you. It's very procedurally oriented. If you don't do everything in the exact procedure that's prescribed by the manufacturer, as far as taking the controller from, cold start all the way up through commissioning and final, start to link points and those kind of things. If you don't do everything exactly right, it'll punish you. So you've got to develop some discipline in your team to know that those steps are necessary to go through and get that going. So my team, we became probably the most accomplished in our market with the line protocol, and consequently installed quite a number of buildings with the line protocol. Well, transitioning to the BACnet protocol was major. It was a major, because basically it got down to the point where there's only one or two manufacturers that will continue to support the line protocol, because the market as a whole was marching stampede style right toward the BACnet protocol.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously the manufacturer that we were representing, they were giving us new controllers that were BACnet. And so I had to anticipate that, and I had to take my key guys, my key teammates, and bring them out of the rotation to get them trained up on the new BACnet product, which meant I had my maybe second tier team keeping up with the volume that we had with the old line-based controllers. At the same time, I was building a whole new team to support the BACnet protocol, controllers, field controllers. So I had, 2 or 3 people trained, and then we always would send people to the factory training, but we'd also tell them, you're going, but we train the trainer. So when you come back, we're going to set up in-house training. A lot of the manufacturers would support it with sending us product, and we could set up, do simulations and those kinds of things, learning it. But it was about a 2-year transition where we were installing still the old line stuff, but then when we were beginning with the BACnet. And with that new product, we had to learn all the idiosyncrasies associated. With the line, it's non-polarity sensitive on the com front. Basically it's just, you hook up 2 wires and it'll communicate. Well, with the BACnet, it's very polarity sensitive. And plus there's a shield, so you have to know where to ground that shield and how to ground that shield, and what happens if you do ground the shield, or if you don't ground the shield, or, do we ground it on which end, whatever. So those little fine nuances that it takes to, get that system up and running, and then doing it so that it can, run reliably for 15, 20 years, 20 years. We had to learn that. And so big expense. And, we had travel cost, obviously for the team that went to the factory for training. And then we had, again, sunk cost and training the team, internally to get them up to speed. And then we knew that we weren't going to make a whole lot of money on the first 2 or 3 jobs that we installed, because we're just finding our way, kind of walking along stumbling along in the dark. And so, fortunately, we became very competent and accomplished with the BACnet protocol. And that same scenario played out across whether we were using the Niagara platform or whether we were going with one of the other manufacturers, proprietary platform as far as the UI and, graphics, because at the same time, at the time I'm talking about, we were supporting 4 different manufacturers' products as an independent dealer for those 4 different products. And we were doing it in scale. It wasn't like we had this or that or this or that. We were doing this and that and this and that, at the same time, because we had different customers. We'd either acquired the business because we had capability with that product that they were looking for an alternate dealer for, or we had actually installed that as a part of a new, from the ground up, a new install we had installed. So, maintaining that. And that plays out many, many times across a lot of the integrators, the fact that they're supporting multiple products simultaneously.
Wow. And do they feel like they need to in order to compete, like let their building owners choose in order to get access to more building owners? How does that process work?
The business philosophy will differ by the integrator. In my particular case, being attached to a large mechanical contractor and engineering firm, we had different customers. Let's say, for instance, we had one particular customer that loved the train ecosystem.
Mhm.
They like all train. And so in order for us, our building automation integration team to support our mechanical team, we had to be very accomplished with the train platform. Similarly, we had some manufacturers that had already bought heavily, let's say Johnson Controls. And so the next phase of that plan, they wanted to keep consistent. And so we were a Johnson Controls dealer. So we would go in and, implement the Johnson Control platform and keep on board. So like I say, it's unique. It was unique to us just because of the market that we served and how we were conjoined with our mechanical engineering
Yeah.
and contracting team, because where they went, we went, and
Yeah.
but a lot of times the independent dealers don't have that need, don't have that luxury, but the majority of them do still support multiple systems. Like, for instance, a lot of the manufacturers have folded the Niagara platform in some way, shape, or form into their product mix. So, like,
Mhm.
for instance, you can get it from Distech, you can get it from Honeywell, you can get it from, Schneider Electric, lots of the manufacturers, Aqua, Johnson Controls. You can
Yeah.
actually get the Niagara platform or some implementation of the Niagara platform. So that's a totally different UI. That's a totally different ecosystem to learn as opposed to whatever that manufacturer's base system is. So most integrators are still going to have to be, let's say, bilingual, multilingual, to be
Mhm.
able to support multiple platforms.
And that leads us into our last statement here. You said each integrator, in order, and this brings us full circle back to the beginning as well,
Yeah.
too, which I think is cool. Each integrator, in order to receive the greatest price break, must commit to a minimum dollar volume per year to maintain access to that product
Right.
or products, as you said.
Yeah.
As an integrator, it is imperative to select a manufacturer who can be trusted to provide the most innovative, cost-effective, and reliable products possible, because the integrators stake their reputations and, you said, quote unquote, blood and treasure on being able to profitably apply those products they represent and to do so better than their competitors. So that takes us kind of full circle a little bit.
Yeah, and that's a key. A lot of these manufacturers, I mean, they built their business model around so many dollars, volume per marketplace.
Hmm.
And so when they look at your office and they look at how you shake out compared to Jacksonville or Nashville or, Colorado Springs, whatever, they look and say, that market should have this many dollars in product coming to me. And so we, a lot of the manufacturers in the early days, when I say in the early days, they would look at that and they would give you some leeway. They would know that you're not going to get every job. They would know that while that may be possible in this market, the circumstances around the way your business is structured, the circumstances around the customers that you serve, you may or may not get that high percentage. And so there are a lot of nuances that go into that. But by the same token, in order to maintain the best volume discount, the best pricing for the controllers, and a lot of times there's other incentives that go into it, like training. You get training credits, you get, non-communicating products like valve actuators, damper actuators, some of the hard stuff, you get some credit for volume purchases and those kind of things. So that's a nuance. It's really a challenge if you're competing in the same market with a manufacturer, with an integrator that's selling the same product that you're selling. You see what I mean? Because they've diluted the market. They've cut the market essentially in half. So that makes it difficult for you to hit your mark to get the best volume, the best discount that you can get, from that manufacturer. So that's and the commitment that we make to the customer that we put it in is that we're going to give you the best price, we're going to give you the best service, and we're going to have the best trained people, but we're not going to use that as our velvet hammer to beat you over the head. If you don't like us, we'll introduce you to our competitor. They can come in and we'll support you transitioning if that's what you want to do. So it's, but I always felt like saying that was one thing, but I always knew that my team was better trained. I knew that my team was better equipped. That was the goal. The goal was, okay, you can do that if you want to, but let me tell you what's going to happen. And if it
Hmm.
starts to happen, don't worry. we'll get right back in there with you. We'll hopefully be able to overcome whatever problem may have come up. But,
Yeah. So with those volume agreements, if you look at that from the customer's standpoint, are there any downsides that, because everything, as Charlie Munger says, incentives drive everything, right? Incentives run the world.
yeah.
Does that incentivize anything that ends up into a poor outcome for building owners?
As far as, as far as them pursuing volume or,
If I'm an integrator and I have an agreement with a distributor or with a manufacturer to provide a certain volume every year, um, are there any ways in which that shows up for the customer that are sort of no good?
yeah, I mean, from the customer perspective, they want the best price every time. And they're always going to compete you against the guy that comes up and says, I can do that for $12.55. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So the other thing that I always want to make sure when I talk to my customer about is, I'm buying at a volume that gives me the best buying power. But that buying power is good for me and good for you when we're doing the job. But that buying power also speaks to my ability to mobilize, let's say the engineers, or let's say mobilize the programmers or the customer service team because you're having a problem. You know what I mean? You've got 300 DAV boxes and all of them are doing the exact same thing and we don't know why. You have my confidence because I buy enough volume from these folks that I've got a big voice. So I can call him and say, hey, you need to fly an engineer down here and we need
Mhm.
to walk through this thing together because my guys are stuck. You see,
Yeah,
so there's a when I say there's a virtuous relationship because, the customer wants the best price, but they also want the highest level of comfort that the product they're getting from you and the service they're getting from you is unequal and will make sure that their customer, the occupants of the building are taken care of or are comforted. And at the same time, the manufacturers are making sure that the dealers that they're dealing through, the integrators that they're dealing through are not going to waste their time. They're not going to give them frivolous issues to try to work through. They're not going to waste their time. They're not going to, okay, you go out to the job and call the tech support guy. When you get out there, call him, he'll walk you through what you got to do. You know
yeah,
what I mean? That's expense. That's expense that field engineering for these guys. They have to support them because that's part of their customer support philosophy. But by the same
totally.
token, it's an expense for them that if they know they're dealing with a good and competent dealer, then their value chain and their margin is protected, because they made margin selling me the controller. And
Mhm.
I'm going to make sure that they get that opportunity to sell more controllers through me. And at the same token, I'm going to not waste their time. And then the customer, you see what I mean? So that's the virtuous cycle. It's,
Yeah,
they make good product. They support product. We install product better than anybody. The customer likes it because the price is good. So he wants more. So who do we buy it from? We buy it from the
yeah,
guy giving us the good stuff. So
yeah. I think some people, it makes perfect sense when you explain it to me. I think some people look at those volume agreements and say, well, how does the second or third competitor come into the market and give the owner choice when that second or third competitor can't get the same price that the established integrator has, right? I think some people look at that and they go, well, shit, that's just being protected. You're
yeah,
just protecting it that and furthering lock
yeah.
in for some people.
Well, and that's where trust has to come in. Hopefully these building owners, building managers have developed a relationship of trust. And if that relationship trust is not there, then everything you said is true. There's no trust. Then obviously they'll say, well, this guy's coming in telling me he can do it for $50 and you're
Mhm.
trying to charge me $200. What's going on here? He's got the same product, he's
Yeah,
access to the same factory, what's it? So there has to be some level of trust that's cultivated by the integrator. Honestly, it's not just that you should trust me because I'm a good guy. It's like, you need to earn that trust.
yeah.
The old bucket of trust fills up a drop at a time and empties a bucket full at a time.
All right. So we've sort of unpacked, you called it a virtuous cycle. We've hit that virtuous cycle and sort of explained it for people that aren't in that world and don't understand how that works, which I think that in and of itself will be super valuable to people that are trying to either get data out of
Oh,
that ecosystem, disrupt that ecosystem, buy from that ecosystem, understand why that ecosystem is the way it is. I think that is like a masterclass in what you just provided there. So that's like part one of this. Part two, for the people that are still around after an hour here, is we talked about at the beginning. We have that sort of old way of doing things, that old ecosystem, and then some people call it the venture-backed startup ecosystem, right? Then, and those two things, especially when it comes to controls, are coming together in many ways. And I think what I've said in the past is we're talking about mostly HVAC controls here today. These same patterns play out in access control and electrical products and lighting products and all of that. So we're not just talking about HVAC, but I think one of the things I wanted to get your view on is what would you say to those people that are coming from the world that you came from that aren't sort of jumping on board with the way that I think the industry needs to go? You seem to agree on the way the industry needs to go. The Nexus community seems to be bought into where the industry needs to go. What would you say to those people that are sort of coming from this virtuous cycle world, as you call it?
Well, a lot of the manufacturers have become, let's say, disconnected from the actual customer, the end use customer.
Hmm.
And so, my encouragement to them is to listen to what those end use customers are saying, listen to what they're wanting, and know that your integrators that are coming to you with these questions or these demands are not just something they cooked up in the back room. It's something that these owners want. They want open systems. They want, product flexibility. They want, access to the data. And so, it's not that. And so what we know is the customer will be tolerant of you for a short time, but after a while, they're going to look somewhere else. And, if the marketplace is providing them what seems to be a viable solution, to the thing that they want, well, they're going to be interested in trying. And the key to those manufacturers is to be, let's say, receptive to what the customer is asking for and evaluate what the situation is. What are they looking for? What are the systems? What are the nuances? How is it different from what we sell? And how can we implement something similar, or how can we give them comfort that what we have already does that? And so, you know, so the manufacturers must be connected to the end user customer. Now, a lot of times the integrators are a little bit protective of who their customer is. They don't even want to tell their manufacturers their customer name, the job name, or anything, because they don't want that guy telling their competitor across town to come over there, because I don't think they're, you see what I mean? So it's kind of a hush hush thing. But the reality of it is that the manufacturers have got to be connected to what the market's telling them, not just what their integrators are buying. And unfortunately, they look so much at the dollars that their integrators or the distributors are buying as their customer. But the reality of it is that they're just a stepping stone to when the real customer is the person in the building that pays the ultimate tab. So a lot of those manufacturers would do well to listen first and react based upon a more informed position. Because as I said, the message that you assembled when you and I first interacted in that Building Integrator Summit and Realcom in 22, you told me that, you're on the right path as it relates to bringing that customer need and desire to the open, and showing that there are manufacturers that are willing to step forward and try some new approaches to those demands that the customers are making that are not necessarily baked into the tried and true product that's available in the marketplace. Not that the product in the marketplace is bad. It's just, it's time for a little bit of an upgrade, a little bit of a nuance.
Totally. And this kind of parallels with a lot of what I've said in the past, especially as it relates to opening up the total addressable market for controls to all buildings, not just bigger buildings that are more complex and have bigger budgets. I feel as if that ecosystem that we described, the whole supply chain, I feel that everyone is a little bit colluding with each other around keeping systems very complex. And because all the reasons you just described. It's sort of no one's deciding, hey, I want these systems to be really complicated. But everyone is sort of incentivized to say, we don't really need to simplify this because the way we make money is to keep things complex. Um, and so that I guess I'm wondering what you sort of think about how do we go from here, which is we just took an hour plus to sort of unpack how the industry works,
Yeah.
right? How do we go from here to getting something to where it's easier to install systems, it's less expensive, and so therefore we're able to then apply controls everywhere, not just bigger buildings, right? Some research I've done shows that 87% of the buildings below 50,000 square feet don't have any control system whatsoever, right? And so therefore they're not able to take advantage of all the different things that control systems enable.
Right.
So how do we get to the point where that industry that we've described here gets a little bit more 21st century, a little bit more accessible, a little bit more scalable?
Wow. One of the things that I hoped when we made the move toward more IP connectivity for control products
Hmm.
was that we would get more, like for instance, you buy a Linksys router and you connect it up to your home network. You hit the IP address of that Linksys router, and all of a sudden you got a configuration page.
Hmm.
And you can go in, you configure some fairly sophisticated routing techniques and so forth in that little router with that UI that's built into the controller that it serves up to you.
Hmm.
All you do is just hit the right IP address, right? So I've got that now. I've got this thing configured. Now, once I exit from that, that thing is programmed and it knows exactly what I want it to do from now on. And so I don't have to think about it anymore. So my hope is that as we've got IP technology at the controller level, when I talk about those air handler controllers, and I'm talking about those terminal unit controllers,
Yep.
small unitary, $150, $200, same price as a router, by the way. You get that with its IP technology, it needs to serve up the web page that it needs to configure that control. There needs to be technology built into, and it's not expensive because obviously a Cisco or Linksys or whomever can do it for a, commercially available router. Should be able to do it for a temperature control module. So the industry needs to go there. And if the industry is not prompted, you can do it through regulation, you can do it through, mandates or whatever, but you can also do it through demand. The customers demand. If they know that there's an option to do that and they know that it would be better, because as I said earlier, every manufacturer that applies to the BACnet protocol has a custom piece of software that's licensed to their dealers. You want to talk about a proprietary hook? That's a proprietary hook.
Yeah.
Because that piece of software, having access to it is the key to the kingdom if you need to reprogram an existing controller or replace a controller. If that controller, on the other hand, was able to serve up the web page, just like a Linksys router or whatever, where you could go in and do your configuration. Then once you exit that configuration, that controller knows from that point forward everything it's supposed to do. If you ever need to get back to it, its address, so you can go right back to it, go up. I can adjust the PID loop. I can, adjust the time. I can do whatever I want to adjust. I can adjust the data throughput. I want you to serve this point to that, IP address, put the routing table built right into it. It knows exactly where that data point needs to go for FDD or, whatever else, and you exit back out. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the kind of stuff that I've become impatient. I've become impatient expecting.
And why doesn't that stuff happen? I mean, I think the answer is baked into this whole conversation, but what is the answer
I
explicitly?
think that more customers need to be aware that that's a possibility, and they need to demand that of the systems that they support, that they allow to come into the system. And you're a kind of a collection point of this. Every manufacturer, whether it be access control, lighting, power quality, whatever, needs to adopt that same philosophy. We're going to the world of IP connectivity. There's no reason for that not to be there. A web server is like 35 cents. It's just ridiculous what they cost to bake into, to a controller these days. So it's not as though they're suffering this big, but if they're not prompted to do it, why don't we just keep on doing it the old way?
Totally.
We got this old piece of software. We'll just put another little hook in it, and it'll talk to this new controller we just created, and it'll still support the old controllers that we got. So it's a win-win for us. Doesn't really answer what the customer wants. The customer wants that open system, open access. That's the key. Open system, open access to the product is what ultimately the customers want. Now, you want to talk about putting integrators and keeping them on their game. Once every product that they sell and their competitors sell are open access, the integrators better be on their game and better be better at configuring systems and more innovative in their approach if they want to keep those same customers, because you want to talk about opening the floodgates to allow multiple integrators to work in a system. That's when it could happen. That's when it could happen. So in my big world, what I'm thinking about, we work so hard to get to high speed IP connectivity at the very finite, even the thermostat on the wall, IP connected. We're at that point now, but we're still stuck, dragging the anchor of the old proprietary software to configure those things the first time.
Yeah.
No, I say there are some exceptions to that. What I'm saying, there are some exceptions. There are some manufacturers that are providing that capability, but for the most part, particularly the large manufacturers, Distech, the Schneider Electric, the big guys, Siemens, they're still staying with that philosophy. And that is, I've got this tool. I need to support my legacy product. So I need to make sure my guys are trained on this legacy software, and I'll just bolt in a new module that'll talk to these new controllers.
Yeah. Yeah. That's certainly the keystone of the power in the supply chain there. All right, Leroy, I really appreciate you coming on and giving this perspective. It hadn't been fully told or told at all. And
it was probably known, but not discussed. And the one thing that I will say, James, is the approach that you're taking to what you're doing here with Nexus, and I've seen you now. I've seen you on a couple of podcasts and actually experiencing one of your sessions, firsthand at Realcomm. The industry needs it. The industry needs a kick in the pants. It needs to be jolted and jostled and move forward. And that means people are going to be uncomfortable.
And I'll say this to anyone that you're kind of bringing into this conversation. I'm not intentionally trying to kick anyone in the pants. I'm trying to move things forward.
Exactly.
I'm driven by what the outcomes that we need from buildings, and these are the things that I view as holding it back. I'm not attacking anyone personally, not at all.
And I didn't feel that myself personally. And there are a lot of people in the industry that are like me that do see, but there are some, that maybe they do feel threatened. I'm saying to them, don't feel threatened. Don't feel threatened, because this is what we've worked for. I've worked for this 1978. And as an integrator, if I'm really focused on my customer and providing them the best experience and the best outcome with the product that I can, I need to be focused on that same thing. So don't be fearful about it. Know that this is not meant to displace or not meant to run you off, but it's jostling and increasing our awareness. And because the first key to solving any problem is being aware there's a problem.
Totally.
There's a problem. We need to get our awareness up. And that's what I say is you're bringing that level of awareness up. And the way you're doing it is you're bringing in people with diverse backgrounds and diverse perspectives as it relates to the way they're approaching problems and the way they're proposing to solve problems. And that's, some of it's from outside the industry. And what I've described to you about a web page coming up out of a VAV control, that's totally outside the industry. You know what I mean? But it needs to be in the industry. That needs to be part of it. Just needs to be, you should be able to walk up to it, connect to it with a Wi-Fi on your phone or your tablet, walk it through, commission done, and you go up to, what's that one? Okay. Read me what's the address? You got the MAC address. That's the way it should be. That's the way it should be done. And
totally agree. So again, thank you so much. Let's close with some carve outs. What book, podcast, TV show, movie, documentary has had a big impact on you lately? Doesn't have to be those. It could be just a story as well.
Well, as I say, we're living in some marvelous times right now with revelations of current world events. And so, a lot of people are feeling maybe overwhelmed. A lot of people may be feeling bewildered, a little unsure, uncertain. I'm just going to say this. I haven't lived as long as everybody, but I've lived a pretty good while. And these are the most interesting times that I've lived
Of your
in.
life. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just say this, that's what we all hope for. We all hope that we can live in interesting times. And so my encouragement to everyone is, don't be dissuaded. Don't be downtrodden. The best is yet to come. It's just around the corner. Trust me.
Love it. Love it. All right. Well, thanks again. And we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, James. Thanks.
All right, friends, thanks for listening to this episode of the Nexus Podcast. For more episodes like this and to get the weekly Nexus newsletter, which, by the way, readers have said is the best way to stay up to date on the future of the smart buildings industry, please subscribe at nexuslabs.online. You can find the show notes for this conversation there as well. Have a great day.